So good afternoon and a warm welcome to this hands-on workshop on Syriac corpus search. For those who don't know me, I'm Sabine Schmidtke, the permanent faculty at the School of Historical Studies representing Near Eastern Studies, and co-hosting this event with me is Maria Mercedes Tuya, representing digital scholarship at the IS, and George Kiraz, the founding director of Beit Marduto. This hands-on workshop is a continuation of the launch of Simtho, which we organized back in April 21, and some of you attended, and we are very glad that you could join us again for this workshop today. We will be meeting in different formats, plenary sessions, as well as breakout rooms for smaller group meetings, and Maria will handle the technical side of the meeting and provide you with technical instructions as we go along, and so will George also do in his introduction. And now let me hand over for George for his introductory remarks and comments and explanations. George.
Thank you very much, Sabine, and thank you very much, Maria. I am going to be sharing my screen for the introduction. So welcome again to the IAS and Beth Marduto workshop. It's a tutorial workshop. And basically, I'm going to start by telling you a few things about what Simtho is and what Simtho is not. And then Slavo is going to tell us a bit more about what corpus is. So Simtho, basically, the word Simtho in Syriac shares with the English lexeme thesaurus, meaning treasure. It is built on no sketch engine, which is a corpus query software. But it's also important to know what Simtho is not. Simtho is not a publishing platform for corpora, for texts. You do not go to Simtho to read texts or to consult editions of texts. For such things, you can go, for example, to the syriaccorpus.org website. In addition, the texts in Simtho are mostly OCR'd text by machine. That means they have a lot of errors, although the OCR rate is quite high. But remember that this is machine-generated text from printed editions. So rather, what Simtho does, it indexes the texts, and in a bit, Slavo is going to tell us a bit more about terminology and what a corpus is. So you can think of Simtho a bit more than a concordance, and through the sessions today, you will hear about the various things you can do with it. You have the program in front of you. It is basically going to be 4 lectures, 20 minutes each, and each lecture will be followed by hands-on labs. We will divide you into groups, into different rooms. You will be given problems to solve, and you will have about 4 minutes to do each problem and 1 minute for us to give you the solution. There'll be an instructor with you in the room, so you can always raise your hand and ask a question. I'm going to introduce everybody now, so we don't have to do introductions later. The first lecture is by Hannah Stork. She is a graduate student at Yale University, and she will introduce us to the basics of corpus search. Then I will take on the second lecture, and I will do more advanced corpus search with regular expressions. Regular expressions will become your next best friend if you want to do many things with Simtho. And then the third lecture will be by Bert Jacobs. Bert is the Mary Seibel Fellow of the Digital Humanities at Beth Marduto for this year. And he completed his PhD at the Catholic University in Louvain. He is still there. And he will talk about how to use metadata in the corpus search. And finally, the last lecture is by Slavo, who is from the Austrian Academy of Sciences. He will tell us about advanced things such as statistical analysis. And also Slavo, just right after me now, will be introducing us to corpus terminology. When we are done with all of this and we come out of our rooms after the fourth lecture, we will all be together here in the same room. Then we will tell you about a bit about what we are trying to do next with Simtho, so you know what to expect in the next year or so. And then we will open the floor to general questions, and we will have concluding remarks by Maria and Shelby. And hopefully we will end at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So now I'm going to stop sharing and we move to Slavo, who will introduce us to the terminology that we are going to be using throughout these lectures. Slavo, it's yours.
Thank you very much, George. Can you folks please confirm you can actually see my screen? All right, thank you so much. So as George already introduced you to some of the fundamentals of Simtho, I'm going to go quickly over what Simtho is and what it is and not, and what it is not, and what a bunch of fundamental terminology that are related to what it actually is. So very quickly, as George already said, Simtho, despite the fancy name given to it as a Syriac Thesaurus, as in the logo, is actually a corpus. We know that term. Those of us who know Latin know the fundamental meaning, body. But we know, as scholars of humanities, we know that term mostly as a collection of texts based on certain criteria: an author, a Galenic corpus, a time period, a pre-400 common era corpus, and so on and so forth. But in this context, what we specifically mean by a corpus is a collection of text in a digital format, electronically processable and processed and searchable. That's primarily what Simtho is. George already mentioned the digital Syriac corpus managed by Jamie Walters at the moment. That's more of a corpus of a first type, because it doesn't have certain advanced things for search and for analysis. Ours is definitely a corpus of the second type. So, it's all about the electronic processing and searching. A question I often get is what texts are in Simtho? Well, as George said, there's a bunch of them, mostly OCR, currently over 400. We can provide you a list if you'd like. And the plan is, of course, as you'll see a little later, to include all of Syriac literature, including modern one, for example. The other question that's asked sometimes is whether there's one Simtho, just one Simtho. The answer to that is no. There are actually several versions of it, as we call them, as you'll see very much soon, and they kind of differ on, to a large extent, by which text they include, and to some extent also by the way that they're processed, because that's the whole electronic and digital thing. Right now we are on a version, I think it's 0.2 beta, and soon we'll get out of that. Now, George already mentioned that, but I'm going to reiterate because that's the important part. There's a bunch of things you can use Simtho for: searching the text in various ways, analyze the use of all kinds of words and phrases, do all kinds of nifty things when it comes to frequency. One very good way for which electronic corpora, very good thing for which electronic corpora are particularly useful is select examples for dictionaries and a whole bunch of other very cool things. There are two main things for which you cannot use Simtho. Number one, you cannot read the text in their entirety. That's sort of kind of built-in limitation. Not only because of copyright and all that sort of stuff, but also because of how Simtho is built. And the other thing that Simtho is not good for is it will not do your research for you. It will help a lot. It can provide you with tools to do things you couldn't even imagine, but you still have to put in the legwork. So don't worry. It will not make you obsolete, quite the contrary. You can find not just answers to your questions, but more questions. You'll never be out of a job. You might be out of financing. So there's some fundamental terminology connected with corpus linguistics, which is what we're here to actually discuss, and the corpora as such. We've already talked about what a corpus is. So basically a collection of text in digital format that's electronically processable and searchable. Now, those, when I'm talking about texts, sometimes I refer to a single text, or we will refer to a single text as a document. So when we talk about corpus, we talk about it usually as being composed of many, many documents, where document equals a text. So many, many works by Jacob Sarug, by Ephraim the Syrian, or many books of the Bible, whatever. These are documents, these are docs. That's how we refer to them. So that's kind of simple. Now we come to a bit more new terminology, and that is token. So essentially, for all intents and purposes, a token is a word. So what you will see in your searches, what you will see when you view the text, you will see a bunch of tokens following one after another. There are, you might call them words, and I think people will talk after me will refer to them as such, but there's a bit of a distinction between a word and a token. But for now, let's just assume that a token is basically a word. And it's what a document is composed of. Attention here, a token can also be punctuation. So often in corpus linguistics, it helps to think of what you have in front of you, of Simtho, for example, as basically just a large collection of tokens, of words, that are organized into documents. And just to quickly, sorry. So that's, those are the three most important terms that we should all be aware of: corpus, document, and token. There's also a bit of one more tricky term that I may use, especially when discussing advanced search techniques, and that's type. So basically, you have all tokens. That's all the words, one after another. Token 1, token 2, token 3, token 4. But some of them are repeated. Some of them are the same thing, the same word, the same instantiation of the same, let's say string, a collection of characters. Those we refer to as type. Essentially, type is a unique word, token is any word. That's why we make that distinction. And here you have an example from, I think, one of the Gospels. It's Mark or Matthew, where you basically see 11 tokens. So 11 different tokens, 11 tokens as such, but there are only 6 types. There are only 6 unique words. Please try to keep that in mind. They might come in handy later. There's another set of terminology that you will very often use, especially in what Bright is going to be talking about, and that's the term metadata. When we talk about metadata, we mean non-linguistic information that is associated with the document. It may sound complicated, but it's not. It's your usual stuff: author, work title, page number, where it was published, and so on and so forth. So those are the metadata. They are associated with the document, and essentially, a document will be a book or a volume of a book. Sometimes when we talk about metadata, especially internally, we talk about tagging. Those of you who took part in Beth Bartudo seminars or summer schools know that term probably. I would advise not to use that term, because that one is actually used for 2 very important things that are also kind of non-linguistic, but you will also encounter them, especially the first one. So when I will talk about tagging, I will talk about 2 types of things. Number one, that's structural tagging, and that's sort of paralinguistic information associated with the document. So in other corpora, we have sentences. Here in Syriac, we don't have sentences yet, but we have pages, we have lines, we have verses, we have chapters, we have volumes. This is structural tagging. So basically something that should give you information about where to find a particular text in a physical volume, in a physical work. So metadata is the information about the work, about the document, about the text. Structural tagging is the information about its structure. And then sometime in the future, hopefully very soon, we'll also have linguistic tagging. And that's very specifically linguistic information that is not associated with the text, but with each token individually. And those are things you might be familiar with. Those are things like lemma, like part of speech, or even syntax, or even name entity recognition. So this is a noun, this is an adjective, this is the root of the sentence, this is the object of a verb, that sort of thing. So to illustrate all of that, this is an example of what a document in Simtho looks like. The whole blue part, that's the metadata. That's associated with the entire document. So here we have a book of, I don't actually know who the author is, Zacharias the Scholastic, the title of the book, the genre, who the translator is, in this case there is none, where the actual edition comes from, and so on and so forth. All the information that will help you to find, kind of associate what you found with a particular text. Then we have dark green, or green, page and line, the structural tagging, the structural information. So we know that this is page 7 of that particular book. This is line number 1. And then we have tokens, one by one. Those are the things that are currently in Simtho. Then there's, in the red cloud, things that we will eventually have. We don't have them yet. That's just an example of what linguistic tagging looks like. So for the noun, we have the gender and we have the number, genitive, gender feminine, number singular, and so on and so forth. So except for the red part, except for the cloud, all this information is currently right now in Simtho. And all this is what our corpus is composed of. Now, one very obvious question is, where do I access Simtho? So as George already said, we use a special corpus management software, corpus query software, which is called the NoSketch engine. This, when you go to the address of Simtho, this is what you will see. Think of it in terms of the software is there to help you search. The software is the vessel, Simtho is the content of it. And one very, very, very important information already associated with the answer to the question of what you cannot do with Simtho, and that's how, in what way does one access Simtho? And there's only one way to do that, and that's by searching. So this is the primary way of accessing Simtho, the primary entry point to Simtho, and that's search. So when you open this page and you select the latest version of Simtho, which is 0.2 from April 2021, so a year old, you will get to the concordance. And this is once again a appropriation of a term by people working in computational linguistics of a term that's from the humanities. So normally a concordance is an alphabetical index, but for people who work with corpora, a concordance is a primary way of using and understanding and accessing corpora. And that's basically a search. So you select a concordance and then you search, and what you get is a result like this one on the right, where basically you have the keyword, the search word, in a column. You have a context on the right, context on the left. And this is the fundamental way in which your results will be displayed. This is what we call a keyword in context display, and very often this term or this abbreviation KWIC will come up, especially in searches. So you might want to remember this one. So I think that's it for me. Thank you very much. George, back to you.
Yeah, and now we go to the first lecture. So Hannah will give her lecture. After that, we're going to split.
We hope you enjoyed the Simtho tutorials. Our Meltho Lab team in the Middle East continues manually correcting OCR'd text to give you access to more accurate texts. The Meltho Lab operation is entirely supported by donations, and it provides young men and women in the Middle East with much needed employment during a time of local crisis. Our project also promotes pride in their heritage as workers contribute to promoting their own culture.